The channel opened with a sound like a held breath finally released. Sub-Commander Vex stood alone. The tactical display showed 89 Zethkari capital ships in a defensive wall. It showed 34 human ships in a single unwavering line. It showed one open channel. He had served 3 fleet marshals. He had calculated the odds 14 times. He had thought about his daughter's cup. The voice was not loud. It was calm. It stated a fact that had been written a long time ago. You heard us once. Vex closed his eyes. The thermos was still warm when the channel closed. I wish I could tell you it ended there. It didn't. Stay close. 72 hours earlier, the crucible had been a different kind of quiet. The War Council chamber was carved from the ribcage of a void leviathan 890 meters long. Fleet Marshal Korath Dren sat at the head, his synthetic eye clicking as he read the vote tally. 2,890, 1-19. The expedition to Helios Ridge was approved. Ambassador Ira Saul wrote one word in her private file, again. Dren's mandible scars twitched. Kestrel 7, he said, 3 turrets, 22 personnel, a listening station. We call it an administrative correction, 12 seconds. Sub-Commander Vex logged the order. He had seen 17 campaigns. He had seen worlds burn, but he had never seen a species that built a listening station and then called it an outpost. He said nothing. Later, when the sensor logs from Kestrel 7 arrived, Vex reviewed them alone. The attack lasted 12 seconds. The Zethkari cruisers fired once. The station went dark. No distress call. No response. The humans did not speak. They did not broadcast. They just died. Vex replayed the logs 3 times. He noted the absence of any human transmission, not a word, not a signal, nothing. He logged the anomaly. Target did not communicate during engagement. He did not share it with Dren. On the EDCOM Dreadnought Resolute Asterisk, Commander Ren Vance read the same after-action report twice. Her quarters were small, a bunk, a desk, a viewport. The report was 3 pages, 22 names, 19 crossed out. The thermos was warm against her palm. Her brother had made it 9 years ago, before his ship went down at Kestrel 7. The dent from his first patrol sat exactly where her thumb rested. The registration number EDC 7740 1K was visible through the heat scoring. She read the report again, 12 seconds, no distress signal. No survivors among the 19 stationed. Lieutenant Hale appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The conclave approved, called it administrative. Vance did not look up. How many ships? 15. They brought 15 ships to a station with 3 turrets. She took a long drink from the thermos. The tea was cold. Get me Corporal Okonkwo. Hale hesitated. She's in medical. Now. He left. Corporal Nia Okonkwo arrived 5 minutes later. She was 34, dark-skinned, with 19 dog tags rattling at her neck. She stood at attention, eyes fixed on a point above Vance's shoulder. At ease, Vance said, tell me what you saw. Okonkwo did not sit. She touched the dog tags one by one. The first shot hit the comms tower. We had 3 seconds to get to the pods. I was on rotation at Helios Ridge. I watched from the ridge. 19 people died in 12 seconds. They did not fire back. They did not have time. Vance nodded. Did they hail? No, they fired and left. No words. The room was silent. The thermos was warm. Vance thought of her brother's ship. There's a protocol, she said. It doesn't have a name. It doesn't have a charter. It exists in 12 documents, each held by a different admiral. The first was written 211 years ago. Okonkwo frowned. I've never heard of it. Neither has anyone else. Vance stood. That's the point. She walked to the viewport. The stars outside were the same gray dots. The silence doctrine. The first document was written after the Tessari incident. Each admiral added a line. The final provision was added decades ago. It says, "When we respond once. We respond completely. We do not explain. We do not negotiate. We do not speak again until they understand what silence means." Okonkwo stopped touching her tags. "That's not a doctrine, that's a declaration." "It's a threshold," Vance said, "and they just crossed it." Hale returned with a different tablet. "Commander, I pulled the fleet status. We have 34 capital ships in stealth positions. They've been there for 11 days. I didn't know they existed." Vance took the tablet. The coordinates marked ships unregistered. "They've been waiting." "For what?" "For the threshold." She set the tablet beside the thermos. "Send the order. All 34 ships emerge at Helios Ridge. Hold position. Do not fire until I give the command." Hale stared. "We're going to war." "We're going to answer. We're not going to explain." Okonkwo touched her dog tags. "What about the 3 on rotation at Helios Ridge? They survived." Vance looked at her. "They're witnesses, they'll tell the story." In the Zethkari flagship, Vex reviewed the sensor data from the Helios Ridge region. Something was wrong. The passive arrays had picked up a faint gravitational distortion 11 days ago. It had been logged as a sensor ghost. But now, in the wake of the attack, he rechecked the logs. The distortion was still there. It was not a ghost, it was a formation, a large one. He calculated the odds. The formation could be debris. It could be a natural phenomenon, but the timing, 11 days before the attack, was too precise. He opened a new log. Anomaly detected, unknown formation. Location, Helios Ridge dust cloud. Recommend active scan. He sent it to Dren. Dren's reply came 3 minutes later. Denied. Focus on staging for Voreth Prime. Vex closed the log. He did not delete it. He thought of the human silence. The outpost had not broadcast a single word, not a distress call, not a surrender, not a curse. He thought of his daughter's cup. He began to understand that silence was not always absence. Sometimes it was a word being held back. The word held back was not a word at all. It was a formation of ships waiting. Vex closed the anomaly log. He opened a personal file, one he had never shown anyone. It contained sensor readings from the Helios Ridge dust cloud taken over 11 days. He had flagged them as interference. He had not deleted them. He calculated the odds again. The formation was too organized to be debris. The gravitational signature matched capital ship displacement. He counted 34 distinct echoes. He did not send this to Dren. He saved it under a new header, unconfirmed. Then he looked at his daughter's cup, a simple ceramic thing, glazed blue, chipped on the rim. She had made it in school 40 years ago. He thought, if they were waiting, what were they waiting for? On the Resolute asterisk, Vance watched the tactical display as 34 green markers emerged from stealth. The Zethkari staging force at Helios Ridge was still 15 red markers, holding position. Lieutenant Hale exhaled. "They have no idea we're here." "They will in about 40 seconds, Vance said. "Passive sensors will register the mass displacement. They'll think it's a ghost at first. Then they'll realize." Okonkwo stood behind her, dog tags still. "What do we do when they realize?" "Nothing. We hold, we don't fire, we don't broadcast, we let them see us." Hale looked at the display. "They're going to freak out." "That's the point." On the Zethkari flagship, a tactical officer called out, "Sensor anomaly, Helios Ridge sector. Mass displacement, 34 contacts, unknown configuration." Dren's synthetic eye clicked. "Debris field." "Negative, Marshal. Organized formation. They just appeared." Vex turned from his station. He knew what it was. He had known for 11 days. He said nothing. Dren studied the display. "Run a full scan. Classify them. If they're hostile, we have 15 ships and 300,000 cryo troops. We can handle debris. They're not debris, Vex said quietly. Dren's mandible scars tightened. Explain. I flagged a gravitational anomaly 11 days ago. I requested an active scan. You denied it. Dren's eye clicked twice. You're telling me those ships have been there for 11 days. I'm telling you they were there before we attacked Kestrel 7. They were waiting. The War Council chamber fell silent. Vex could hear the hum of the atmosphere mixers. Dren turned to the tactical officer. Open a channel, hail them, demand identification. The officer tried. No response. No acknowledgement. The human ships held position, 34 green dots in a single line. They're not answering, the officer said. Try again. Again, nothing. Vex spoke. They're not going to answer. They didn't answer at Kestrel 7. They didn't broadcast a distress call. They don't communicate the way we do. Dren's voice dropped. Then what do? They wait. On the Resolute Asterisk, Vance watched the Zethkari fleet's hails go unanswered. She took a slow drink from the thermos. The tea was bitter. Hale asked, when do we transmit the coordinates? When they stop hailing. When they realize we're not going to speak. When they start to wonder what we're doing. Okonkwo touched her dog tags, and then we give them the coordinates to Voreth Prime, and a timestamp, 72 hours from when we transmit, and we say nothing else. Hale frowned. That's not a threat, that's an invitation. It's a notification. They burned an outpost. We're telling them where we'll be in 3 days. They can meet us there or they can run. Either way, they'll know we're coming. The Zethkari hails ceased after 12 minutes. Dren ordered the 15 ships to form a defensive line. He mobilized the home fleet at Voreth Prime, 89 capital ships. He issued a general alert. Unknown hostile force, 34 vessels, position Helios Ridge. Hold formation. Do not engage unless fired upon. Vex logged the order. He looked at the tactical display. The human ships had not moved. They had not fired. They had not spoken. He calculated the odds. 15 Zethkari ships against 34 unknown vessels. The Zethkari ships were larger, more heavily armed. But the unknowns had appeared from nowhere. They had held position for 11 days without detection. They had not responded to hails. He calculated again. 2.6 to 1 in favor of the Zethkari in a direct engagement. But that assumed the humans would fight conventionally. That assumed they would announce themselves. They had not announced anything. He saved the calculation under the same header, unconfirmed. Then the human ships broadcasted. Not a formal transmission. A single burst on the same open channel Dren had used to declare Kestrel 7 an administrative matter. The message was 3 lines. Coordinates Voreth Prime. Timestamp 72 hours, no signature, no demand, no threat. Dren read it aloud. They're telling us where they're going, that's absurd. Vex said nothing. He thought of the outpost that had not broadcast a distress call. He thought of the 19 dead who had not said a word. He said, they're not telling us where they're going. They're telling us they know where we are, and they're giving us time to prepare. They want us to see them coming. Dren's eye clicked rapidly. That's not how war works. That's how silence works, Vex said. It's a statement. On the Resolute Asterisk, Vance watched the Zethkari fleet's formation. They were pulling back, consolidating, preparing for a defensive stand at Voreth Prime. The 15 ships at Helios Ridge were holding, but nervously. Okonkwo spoke. Commander, I knew one of the 19, Corporal Anya Reyes. She was 22. She had a daughter on Earth. She used to send recordings of her daughter's laughter. She said it kept her sane. Vance looked at her. She didn't get to send one after the attack. No. The comms tower was hit first. She didn't have time. Vance set the thermos down. That's why we're doing this, so that the next outpost gets time. Hale interrupted. Commander, the Zethkari are repositioning. They're forming a defensive wall at Voreth Prime. 89 ships. They're pulling everything they have. Good, let them see us. Let them count us. Let them wonder why we're not firing. The human ships began to move. Not toward Voreth Prime, not yet. They formed a single corridor 12 light-years wide pointing directly at the Zethkari home system. They did not deviate. They did not speed up. They held a steady course. Vex watched the formation. He recalculated the odds. Now 2.6 to 1 still, but with 89 ships on defense, the humans were outnumbered. Yet they moved as if they were not. He thought, what are they not telling us? He opened a personal channel to the Kavani Observation Corps. He sent a brief message, requesting historical data on human communication protocols, pre-contact period. Specifically, patterns of extended silence followed by sudden, coordinated action. He did not expect a reply soon. The Kavani took days to answer, but he needed to understand. 72 hours, the countdown had started. On the Resolute the crew rotated shifts. Vance stayed on the bridge, the thermos always within reach. She watched the Zethkari defensive wall grow on the display, 89 red dots, layered, fortified. Hale brought coffee. They're going to fight, they're not going to run. I know. 89 ships. We have 34. Even with the platforms, we're outnumbered. Vance nodded. We're not trying to win a battle, we're trying to win a silence. Okonkwo entered. Commander, the conclave just voted. 4,200 to 0. They're condemning the Zethkari action and calling for de-escalation, but they have no ships that can arrive in time. Of course they don't, that's why we're here. The hours crawled. At hour 48 the human ships had covered half the distance. They still had not fired. They still had not broadcast. The Zethkari wall held, but the tension was palpable. Vex watched from his station. He had not slept. He had not eaten. He had recalculated the odds 14 times. The number always came back to 2.6 to 1. But he had also calculated something else. The humans had not spoken in 48 hours. They had not sent a single message. They had not responded to any hails. He thought of the cup. He thought of the outpost's 12 seconds. He thought of the absence of a distress call. At hour 59, Dren called a war council. His eye clicked rapidly. They're not firing, they're not hailing, they're just moving. What do they want? No one answered. Vex spoke. They want us to ask that question. They want us to realize that we don't know what they're capable of. They want us to see that silence is not weakness, it's preparation. Dren slammed a fist on the table. There are 34 ships, we're 89, we have cryo troops. We have orbital platforms, we have the home advantage, they have nothing. They have patience, Vex said, and they have a doctrine. A doctrine. The silence doctrine, I've been researching. It's not a military plan, it's a philosophy. 12 documents written over 211 years. Each one adds a line. The final line, we do not speak again until they understand what silence means. Dren stared. That's not a doctrine, that's a poem. It's a threshold, Vex said, and we crossed it when we burned Kestrel 7. The War Council fell silent. The atmosphere mixers hummed. On the Resolute Vance stood at the viewport. The Zethkari home system was visible now, a distant star, surrounded by the red dots of the defensive wall. Hale asked, are we going to fire? No. We're going to hold, and when the 72 hours are up we're going to open a channel. One time, one voice, 4 words. Okonkwo touched her tags. What are they? Vance did not answer. At hour 71, Vex was alone in the war room. The tactical display showed 89 Zethkari ships in a defensive wall, 34 human ships in an unwavering line, one open channel. He had served 3 fleet marshals. He had calculated the odds 14 times. He had thought about his daughter's cup. He had thought about the 19 dead. The channel opened. Vex waited. The room was silent. One voice, 4 words. "You heard us once." He closed his eyes. The thermos was still warm when the channel closed. But that was the beginning. Now the waiting was over. The war room did not explode. It did not erupt in panic. It just went still. Dren's synthetic eye had stopped clicking. His mandibles hung slack. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. Vex opened his eyes. He looked at the tactical display. The human ships had not moved. They had not fired. They had not said anything else. "They're waiting," Vex said. "They said what they came to say. Now they're waiting to see what we do." Dren found his voice. "They threatened us. They broadcasted a threat on an open channel." "They didn't threaten. They stated a fact. We heard them once. We won't hear them again. That's not a threat. That's a boundary." Dren slammed his fist on the console. "They burned nothing. We burned an outpost. They're 34 ships. We're 89. We have the home advantage. We have cryo troops. We have." "You have nothing they want," Vex said. "They're not here to conquer. They're not here to negotiate. They're here to be seen." The War Council chamber was silent. The atmosphere mixers hummed. Dren's cloak of 12 silks caught the dim light. On the Resolute Asterisk, Vance stood at the viewport. The Zethkari home system filled the view, a blue star, a green world, and 89 red dots forming a wall. Hale reported, "No response from the Zethkari. They've gone completely dark. No hails, no repositioning, nothing." Okonkwo stood behind her, dog tags still. "They're thinking. They're trying to understand." "They won't," Vance said. "They can't. They don't have the category for this. They see silence and assume it's empty." Hale frowned. "So what do we do?" We hold until 72 hours. Then we turn around and leave." "Leave?" "We're not here to win a battle. We're here to answer a question. They asked if we would respond. We responded. Now they have to decide if they want to ask again." The hours crawled. At hour 72, the human ships did not advance. They did not retreat. They held position, pointing at Voreth Prime, and waited. Vex watched the display. The human ships had not fired. They had not moved. They had not broadcast. They had simply stated a fact and then stopped. He opened his personal file, the one he had not shown anyone. He read the sensor logs again. 11 days of waiting. 34 ships holding position. No communication. No movement. They had been ready before the attack. They had been waiting for the threshold. He thought they didn't build a fleet to fight. They built a fleet to be seen. They built it so that when they spoke, we would understand that the silence had a purpose. He looked at his daughter's cup, the chipped rim, the blue glaze, the small, imperfect thing he had carried for 40 years. He wrote a message to the Kavani Observation Corps. "I understand now. The silence was not absence. It was architecture. They were building something while we were waiting for them to speak." He did not send it. He saved it to his personal file. On the Resolute Asterisk, Okonkwo approached Vance. "Commander, I need to tell you something about the outpost." Vance turned. "Go on." "When we were attacked, I was on rotation at Helios Ridge. I watched the whole thing. The 19 people on Kestrel 7, they had 15 seconds. 15 seconds from the first sensor ping to impact. They knew they were going to die." She touched her dog tags. But they didn't panic. They didn't broadcast a distress call. They just waited. They shut down the comms tower intentionally, so the Zethkari couldn't track the data back to Earth. They gave themselves up to protect the fleet. Vance stared at her. "That's not in the report." "No, it's not. I didn't include it. I was ashamed. I survived. They didn't." Vance set the thermos down. "There's no shame in surviving. There's only shame in wasting it." Okonkwo nodded slowly. "That's why we're here, isn't it?" to make sure it wasn't wasted. Yes, that's exactly why. Dren convened another war council. His voice was sharper now, frayed at the edges. They've been holding position for 72 hours. They haven't fired, they haven't moved, they just exist. What do they want? Vex spoke before anyone else could. They want us to accept that the silence was a choice. They want us to understand that we are not the only ones who can speak. They want us to know that what we did at Kestrel 7 was not an administrative correction. It was a declaration of war, and we lost. Dren's eye clicked rapidly. We haven't lost anything, we're still here. They're still out there, we have ships, we have troops, we have. You have a wall, Vex said, and they have patience, and patience wins. It always wins. The War Council dissolved into argument. Dren demanded a full-scale assault. The tactical officers calculated the odds, 6-1 in favor of the Zethkari if they engaged. Vex said nothing. He looked at the display. The human ships had not moved. They had not fired. They had not spoken. He thought, they don't need to win a battle. They already won. They made us see them. They made us realize we were blind. At hour 74, Ambassador Ira Sol sent a private message to Dren. She wrote, "The Conclave has voted to intervene. 4,200 to 0. We have no ships that can arrive in time, but we have a voice. And we are using it to say, stop. Stop and think about what they are showing you." Dren read the message and threw his tablet across the room. Vex picked it up. He read the message. He thought of the cup. He thought of the 19 dead. He thought of the outpost that had not broadcast a distress call. He said, "She's right. We need to think about what they're showing us." Dren turned on him. "You're siding with them." "I'm siding with the truth. They were waiting for us to cross a threshold. We crossed it. And now they're showing us what it means. They're not going to attack. They're not going to negotiate. They're just going to wait until we understand." The war room went quiet. The silence was so thick it felt solid. On the Resolute Asterisk, Vance watched the Zethkari wall. The red dots were still there, still holding, but they had stopped hailing. They had stopped repositioning. They were waiting. Hale asked, "What are they doing?" "They're arguing," Vance said. "They're trying to decide what to do with a situation they've never seen before. They're trying to fit us into a category. And they can't." Okonkwo touched her dog tags, "So we wait. We wait. We wait until they understand that silence is not empty. It's full. It's full of everything we didn't say." At hour 86, Vex made a decision. He requested a private meeting with Dren. The fleet marshal was alone in his quarters, his cloak of 12 silks draped over a chair. "What do you want?" Dren asked. Vex sat across from him. "I want you to hear what I'm about to say, and I want you to remember it, not because it's a threat, because it's the truth." Dren stared at him. "Go on." "The humans have 34 ships. We have 89. We could destroy them. We could win a battle, but if we do, we will lose the war. Not because they'll come back with more ships, because they'll go silent again. And next time they won't tell us where they're going. They'll just show up." Dren's eye clicked. "That's not a strategy, that's fear." "No, it's understanding. The silence doctrine isn't a military plan, it's a philosophy. They don't want to conquer us. They want us to know that we can't conquer them, not because they're stronger, because they're patient. And patience is the strongest weapon there is." Dren was silent. The room hummed with the low thrum of the flagship's engines. Vex stood. "I've requested a transfer to the Kavani Observation Corps. I'm going to study them. I'm going to understand how a species that never speaks can build something so loud." Dren did not respond. Vex left the quarters. He walked to his station. He looked at the tactical display one last time. The human ships were still there, still holding, still silent. He thought of his daughter's cup. He thought of the 19 dead. He thought of the outpost that had not broadcast a distress call. He opened a new message. He wrote, "The silence was not absence. It was a different kind of speech, and we were not listening. He sent it to Irasol. She replied 2 minutes later, one word, finally. On the Resolute asterisk, Vance received a signal, not from the Zethkari, from the Kavani Observation Corps, a private message from a species she had never met. It read, "We understand, we have been watching, we know what you are building, we will not interfere." She read it twice, then she set the thermos on the console. Okonkwo asked, "What does that mean?" "It means they saw us, the whole time. They knew we were building something, they were waiting to see if we would use it. And we did. We answered, that's all we were ever going to do." The Zethkari wall began to crumble, not in a direct way, no ships retreating, no formations breaking, but the red dots shifted one by one subtly. They were pulling back. They were making space. Dren did not order it. He did not authorize it. The ships were moving on their own. Vex watched, he understood. They had seen the doctrine. They had understood the silence. And now they were leaving, not because they were defeated, but because they had finally seen what was in the empty spaces. He closed his eyes. He thought of the cup. He thought of the word, finally. Vex opened his eyes. The wall was gone, not destroyed, not broken, just gone. 89 red dots had pulled back into a loose formation around Voreth Prime, still defensive but no longer a wall. They had made room. Dren stood at the viewport, his back to the room. His cloak of 12 silks hung motionless. His synthetic eye had stopped clicking. "They're not going to fire," Vex said. Dren did not turn. "No, they're not. They already won. They just wanted us to know they could." Dren's mandibles moved, but no words came out. For the first time in 17 campaigns, he had nothing to say. Vex walked to his station and began packing his personal effects. The cup, the data pad with the anomaly logs, a small ceramic figure his daughter had made, a lopsided bird with one wing longer than the other. He did not look back. On the Resolute asterisk, Vance watched the Zethkari ships pull back. The red dots on the display were spreading out, creating space, leaving the corridor open. Hale exhaled. "They're retreating." "They're not retreating," Vance said. "They're making space. They're acknowledging that we exist. That's all we needed." Okonkwo stood behind her, dog tag still. "So we leave. We hold for 1 more hour. Then we turn around and go home. We don't fire, we don't broadcast. We just leave." The hour passed in silence. The human ships held position. The Zethkari ships held position. Neither side fired. Neither side spoke. At the end of the hour, Vance gave the order. All ships return to base. Maintain stealth protocols. No transmissions. The 34 green dots began to move, turning away from Voreth Prime, back toward the Helios Ridge dust cloud. They moved in perfect formation, unwavering, silent. Vance watched them go. Then she set the thermos on the console. The registration number faced the stars. Okonkwo asked, "What happens now?" "Now they think about what they saw. They think about a species that waited 211 years to answer. They think about a silence that was not empty. And then they decide if they want to test it again." The bridge went quiet. The viewport showed the stars and the void and the distant point where the Zethkari home system had been. Vex arrived at the Kavani observation post 3 weeks later. It was a small station, built into an asteroid, staffed by a species with long memories and longer patience. The Kavani welcomed him without ceremony. One of them, a frail, elongated figure with bioluminescent skin patterns, handed him a data tablet. "We have been watching," the Kavani said. "We have records of human communication patterns going back 2,000 years. We believe you will find them useful." Vex took the tablet. He thought of his daughter's cup. He thought of the lopsided bird. He thought of the 19 dead who had not broadcast a distress call. He said, "Thank you." The Kavani nodded. "They have a word for what they did. It is not in any database, but we have a translation, finally." Vex looked at the tablet. He began to read. 3 years later, the Zethkari hegemony withdrew from 8 border systems. No shots were fired. No treaties were signed. They simply left. The conclave convened an emergency session to discuss the withdrawal. Ambassador Ira Saul stood before the chamber and said, "They saw what was in the silence. They understood what it meant, and they chose to leave." The conclave was silent. Then, one by one, the species began to add a new category to their classification systems: threshold species. It meant a species that does not announce itself, a species that waits, a species that answers once and then returns to silence. Vex read about the withdrawal at his station on the Kavani observation post. He thought of the cup. He thought of the lopsided bird. He thought of the outpost that had not broadcast a distress call. He wrote a report that began, "I have calculated the odds 14 times. I have stopped calculating." He did not mention the humans by name. He did not need to. On the resolute asterisk, Vance stood at the viewport one last time. The thermos was in her hand. The registration number was still visible through the heat scoring. Okonkwo approached her. "Commander, they're cataloging the doctrine. They're declassifying it." Vance nodded. 12 documents, 7 updates, 211 years. Will they understand it? No, they'll categorize it, they'll file it, they'll call it a military plan, but they won't understand it, they can't, not until they need it. Okonkwo touched her dog tags, and if they do, then they'll know what to do, they'll wait, they'll build, and when the time comes, they'll answer. Vance set the thermos on the console. The registration number faced the stars. She did not say anything else. She did not need to. The stars were the same gray dots they had always been, but now, looking at them, she saw something she had not seen before. She saw a silence that was not empty. She saw a patience that was not weakness. She saw a species that had answered once and was now waiting again. She turned away from the viewport. The thermos was still warm.